Greetings, brave adventurers! My name is FoxyBard, and today it's time to learn! As some of you may know, I have been playing TTRPGs for around 15 years, both as a player and as a GM. In that time, I've had a lot of good experiences, an amount of bad ones, and I've learned a lot about how to run and play in these games we love so much. Things apart from which dice to roll or which numbers to add. Yeah, that's the easy part. You just read the rules for that. Where things get tricky, where the real fun comes out, how to make your games both fun and memorable. Well, that's where this series comes in. Welcome to the FoxyBard Academy of Role-Playing. In today's lesson, how to design and run a truly great and memorable encounter. To start, we must ask ourselves, what makes an encounter good? What makes it memorable? What makes it great? This answer is going to vary from person to person, but there are a few very common things that come up. Narrative, character, mechanics, and difficulty. I will be talking about each of these at length and using some examples from my current Pathfinder campaign to illustrate what I'm saying. First up, narrative. This can mean several things. It often means tying the encounter into the overall plot, and while that's the most obvious, there is plenty that can be done with unrelated encounters as well. Let's break it down. Narrative in a story can mean just that, the outright story being told to you. This is fine, and you should certainly do so, and your players may very well remember the quest fondly from a good story or a catchy hook, but there is a lot more that I like to include. When planning out an encounter, ask yourself a few questions about the location and the people in it. Why are they in that place? What do they know about the place? Are they intelligent enough to take advantage of things? How long have they been in the place? The answers to these questions can give you some guidance on how to use the environment to your advantage from a narrative perspective. Environmental storytelling is powerful. Someone telling me a gang has been holed up in an old warehouse for months is one thing. Them having had the time to refit and rearrange the contents to be able to filter people into a narrow choke point is another. Yes, this warehouse is their base of operations. Of course they have things set up in a way to have an advantage against invaders. To use an example from my own game, my players were infiltrating a secret prison they found. I wanted to tell them what had happened there without just leaving a journal that said, "This is what happened here." So as they were exploring, going through the rooms, there were various undead locked in cages, still in the clothes of commoners. In another room, there were a large number of more twisted undead, all piled together, discarded experiments, malformed. Even in the storage rooms was evidence of what was going on. All the mundane supplies were rotting. Those in this prison were not prisoners. They were experiments for creating powerful undead. Undead don't need to sleep. The blankets were rotting and unused. Undead don't need to eat. The food was uneaten, never disturbed. Not all loot has to be actual loot. Sometimes it's telling the story of what happened. When players figure out what's going on just from what they find in an area, it sticks with them. You shouldn't even need to tell them if environmental storytelling is done well. A more amusing example would be a cursed item. 2 wands and a suit of half-plate armor sitting in the middle of a blackened singe on the ground. Upon examination, the wands were disintegrate with 1 charge used, and create water, also with 1 charge used. Can you guess what happened? In testing out the wand of disintegrate, it turned out to be cursed and recoiled on the caster, and the wand of create water was used in a panic to try to save themselves. Obviously, water doesn't put out disintegration, so it was mostly useless, just an amusing hint at the wand's cursed state. Through environmental storytelling, you can create a narrative more than just having your players read something. Try it out. It takes a bit of work, but you'll immediately get compliments. Next, character. This may also seem obvious and should probably already be in your GM repertoire, but there should always be some kind of character element to what's happening. Go kill some bandits. Great, sure, a classic. But who are they? Who wants them dead? Put those people in the story and give it depth and meaning. If there's someone counting on your success, a specific person, not just the town or whatever, that will further encourage your players to be successful. Who do they meet along the way? This is usually the part where the randomly adopted goblin comes up. It's a classic for a reason. Players love to meet people who might matter later while out adventuring. So let them. In fact, add a few of your own, and don't be fully clear up front with who they are. The woman begging for help in the middle of the prison? She works there. She's the one who made all the undead. But she doesn't just tell you that. She tries to pretend she was trapped here, so as not to get blamed by the party. Then later, her eventual double-cross seems much worse, and suddenly, you've got the worst person ever and a highly memorable encounter just because one pretty face was a liar. Role-playing games are all about character. Make sure you include some, even in your inconsequential encounters, and never be afraid to upgrade random bandit into recurring NPC. This is especially important for social encounters. Perhaps my single most memorable encounter was when my players were asked to meet with someone and cause a distraction. Simple, normal, usually just a few rolls and we move on. But not this time. They were introduced to Marty Malevolent, who truly believed himself to be the most intelligent being on the planet, and who debated like Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro, and Jordan Peterson combined into one unbearable amalgam of stupidity. For the next hour, all that happened was talking, and to this day, all it takes is the name Marty to instill rage into my players. The best part is that he did literally nothing wrong or illegal. He harmed nobody beyond awful, insipid words, and he's the most beloathed character in my game. They love how much they hate him. Apologies to anyone actually named Marty, it was for the fun alliteration. But this brings us to mechanics. Here's where stuff gets tricky. You want to use the mechanics of whatever game system you're playing to your advantage. This can often build on both of the previous things too. If you want a particular enemy to seem significant, make them do different things than the other ones. Give the shadow class levels. I did this. It's great. There's bandits with swords and bows. Make one of them an alchemist who throws bombs. They'll remember her. But also, it's totally okay, and I even recommend inventing abilities and mechanics from whole cloth. As a fight rages on, perhaps the ceiling begins to collapse, cutting off whole parts of the battlefield, maybe even doing damage to anyone caught in it. Maybe this particular monster has a secret screech ability that weakens those around it, or interacts with the environment in new and interesting ways. Or maybe the monster is completely original with no basis in anything established. Now, while this can be cool and memorable, it's very hard to get right. It's often the thing that can change an awesome encounter into an accidental horror story. This is going to vary the most depending on which system you're playing, as it's not advisable to have your NPCs just blatantly break the rules of the game. That's not memorable, that just feels bad. Keep things on an equal playing field. Challenging your players, and doing it fairly, is foxing difficult, but so worth it. And a lot of it comes down to difficulty. Now, since we're all playing different games and systems with different parties, I cannot give you a quick and easy way to balance the difficulty of an encounter. This is one you're going to have to figure out on your own. Just know that in systems that use it, CR is merely a suggestion, a guideline. It does not tell the full story. You need to look at the actual numbers these enemies are capable of. If they can't actually do anything to your players specifically, treat them as lower danger. When making your own, it's good to find a balance where something can do a decent chunk of someone's HP in one hit, but not so much as to knock them down with a single blow. There's a happy medium of danger crossed with daring. Also, mix up their tactics and locations. It rarely makes sense for fights to just take place in an otherwise empty field, so use that environment to tell the players about who their enemies are or how smart they are. Make the environment as much an enemy or ally as the creatures they encounter. You have players constantly trying to find creative uses for the environment in fights? Why don't you take a turn doing the same thing? There's a bit of loose rubble ahead? Well, that's because you can trigger a miniature landslide, creating difficult terrain in an area. This area has a lot of tall boxes. Well, there's enemies hiding on top of them that can shoot down at you, while you struggle to shoot back. One of the enemies dropped a flat, rectangular shield. I mean, I guess you can try to use it as a skateboard down some stairs while you shoot a bunch of orcs, then kick it into the throat of another one? Legolas did it. Just roll athletics. But remember, anything your players can do, your NPCs can do too. What I mean by all of this is that even the most mundane, run-of-the-mill encounter can be elevated into something good and memorable. Difficulty takes a lot of forms. Sure, this enemy isn't a threat on its own, but combine it with a more interesting set of circumstances or with good tactics, and suddenly things have escalated, even if your players were never actually under that much threat. Although, never be afraid to dangle the threat of death over players' heads. I'm of the philosophy that death should always be on the table. What fun is a game if you can't lose? And that's it. I could go on for hours and hours more about each point, but I want to get this video out ever, so we're going to wrap it up here. If you have any tips about any of these points, or if you feel I forgot something, or even just your own experience with a particularly memorable encounter, let us know down in the comments. And I hope you all learned something. This is the part where I tell you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. You know what it is, and you know what it do. In addition, a huge thank you to my supporters over on patreon.com/FoxyBard, whose names are scrolling by the screen right now. Their support means the world to me, and they help me keep doing what it is that I do. You know how to join if you want. You're smart. That's what I like about you. And here's the end of the Foxy video by this FoxyBard. I'll see you next time. Class dismissed.